When Barron Trump stepped into a struggling taxi driver's cab, no one could have predicted what he would do next, but his actions would lead to a life-changing moment that left everyone speechless. It was a gray, rainy afternoon in New York City, the kind of day where the clouds hung low and the streets shimmered with reflections of neon signs and traffic lights. People hurried along the sidewalks, umbrellas bumping into one another, all eager to escape the chilly drizzle. The air smelled of wet pavement mixed with the distant aroma of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor trying to make the best of the gloomy weather. Barron Trump stood at the edge of the curb, pulling up the hood of his jacket to shield himself from the rain. He had just left a small bookstore tucked between towering skyscrapers, a rare quiet spot he visited when he needed a break from his hectic life. Clutching a paperback novel he'd picked up on a whim, he raised his hand to hail a taxi. A yellow cab splashed through a puddle and pulled up beside him. The driver leaned over and rolled down the passenger window. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of an accent and a warmth that contrasted with the cold day. "Yes, thank you," Barron replied, opening the door and sliding into the back seat. He shook off the rain from his jacket and settled in. "Central Park West, please." "You got it," the driver said, merging back into traffic. The windshield wipers swished rhythmically, and the soft hum of the engine filled the cab. Barron glanced around the interior, clean but worn, with a small collection of trinkets hanging from the rearview mirror, a tiny silver angel, a faded photograph of a smiling family, and a string of prayer beads. The driver caught Barron's eye in the rearview mirror. He appeared to be in his late 40s, with tired eyes and a gentle demeanor. "Crazy weather we're having," he remarked, offering a friendly smile. "Yeah, it's pretty unpredictable," Barron agreed. "Seems like it's been raining forever." The driver nodded. "Makes the city feel different, doesn't it? Almost like it's quieter somehow." Barron looked out the window at the blur of pedestrians and the glow of lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. "I kind of like it," he admitted. "Gives me time to think," the driver chuckled softly. Not many young people appreciate a moment to themselves these days. Barron noticed an envelope on the passenger seat marked "Final Notice" in bold red letters. Next to it was a small stack of bills held together with a worn rubber band. The driver's hands gripped the steering wheel a bit tighter as they waited at a red light, his gaze momentarily distant. A subtle tension filled the cab, but the driver quickly masked it with another question. "So, you heading home or off to another adventure?" Barron smiled faintly. "Just heading home. Thought I'd do some reading tonight." "Ah, reader, good for you," the driver said, his eyes lighting up for a moment. "Books are a wonderful escape." As they continued through the maze of city streets, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than met the eye. The weariness in his expression, the overdue bills. Something told him this ride was going to be more significant than either of them could have imagined. The cab rolled steadily through the bustling streets, the rain tapping gently on the windows. Barron had opened his book, but he wasn't reading. His eyes kept drifting to the envelope on the passenger seat. Final Notice. The bold red letters were impossible to miss. It looked official, the kind of letter no one wants to receive. The driver seemed to sense Barron's gaze and reached over to shift the envelope slightly, as if hiding it would make it disappear. His hands lingered on the steering wheel a little longer than necessary, his knuckles pale from gripping too hard. "Long day?" Barron asked, breaking the silence. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, offering a half-hearted smile. "Yeah, you could say that. It's always long when you're behind the wheel." Barron nodded, sensing there was more to the story. "You been driving for a while?" 15 years, the driver replied, his tone carrying both pride and exhaustion. "It's not easy, but it's honest work. It keeps food on the table." Barron noticed the small photo dangling from the rearview mirror again. A woman and 2 young boys, all smiling brightly. "Your family?" he asked, nodding toward the picture. The driver's smile softened. "Yeah, that's my wife and my boys. They're everything to me." But his voice faltered slightly as he added, "It's been tough lately." Barron hesitated before speaking again. "Tough how?" The driver sighed, the kind of sigh that seemed to carry years of frustration and worry. "You see that letter?" He motioned toward the envelope on the seat, his tone quieter now. "It's from the bank. They're threatening to repossess my car. Missed a few payments. If I lose this cab, I lose my job. And if I lose my job..." His voice trailed off, but the weight of his words hung heavily in the air. Barron's chest tightened. He could hear the strain in the driver's voice, the quiet desperation of someone trying to hold it all together. "That doesn't seem fair," he said after a pause. "You've been working hard for years, and they're ready to take it all away?" The driver chuckled bitterly. "Fair? That's not a word you hear much when you're struggling, but I'll figure something out. I always do." He said it as if he were trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Barron sat back in his seat, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the thought of this man losing everything. He imagined what it must feel like to carry that weight, to know that everything you're working for could be gone in an instant. True. As the cab pulled up to a red light, the driver turned to look at Barron directly. "I'm sorry," he said, forcing a smile. "You don't need to hear all this. It's just been one of those weeks." But Barron shook his head. "No, it's okay," he said sincerely. "Sometimes it helps to talk." The light turned green and the driver nodded before focusing back on the road. "You're a good kid," he said quietly. "Most people wouldn't care." Barron didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out the window, watching the rain blur the city lights. Something inside him stirred, a feeling he couldn't quite place. He didn't know what he could do, but one thing was certain: he couldn't just sit by and do nothing. The cab turned onto a quieter street, nearing Barron's destination. The driver's words lingered in the back of his mind. He sat for, "If I lose this cab, I lose everything." As they approached the corner where Barron would usually get out, he made a decision. His chest tightened with both nerves and determination. This ride wasn't over. Not yet. As the cab neared Barron's destination, the rain eased into a light drizzle, and the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers slowed. Barron glanced again at the envelope on the passenger seat, then at the driver. The man's shoulders sagged as if the weight of the world rested on them. Barron's mind raced. He wasn't the type to jump into situations without thinking, but something about this felt different. This man wasn't asking for help. He was simply sharing a piece of his burden, and that made it feel even more urgent. When they pulled up to the curb, Barron hesitated before opening the door. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, already reaching for his wallet. The driver tapped a button on the meter. "That'll be $18.50. Barron handed over a 20 and paused as the driver fished out some change from his coin tray. "Keep it," Barron said. But as the driver nodded his thanks, Barron felt a surge of determination. He couldn't let this end here. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Barron said, his voice careful but steady. The driver turned toward him, his tired eyes meeting Barron's. "Sure, what's on your mind?" "What happens if you can't make the payments on your cab?" Barron asked bluntly. "I mean, what's your backup plan?" The driver let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. "Backup plan? I don't have one. This cab is everything. If I lose it, I lose my income, and then, well, you can imagine what happens next." He shrugged, trying to mask his fear. "But don't worry about me. I'll figure something out. I always do." Barron nodded, but the man's words stuck with him. "I'll figure something out." It sounded more like hope than certainty. Barron made a quick decision. "Do you have a minute to talk?" he asked, shifting in his seat. The driver frowned, clearly surprised. "Talk about what?" "About how I can help," Barron replied simply. The man blinked, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and cautious curiosity. "Help? Kid, you don't even know me." Barron smiled faintly. "You don't know me either, but you let me into your cab." The driver stared at him for a moment, his brow furrowed. "I appreciate the thought, but I don't think there's much anyone can do. The bank wants their money, and I don't exactly have a secret stash hidden under the seat." Barron leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but firm. "What if I told you I might know a way to get you through this, at least long enough to catch your breath?" The driver's eyes narrowed, his skepticism clear. "What are you saying?" Barron hesitated, not wanting to overwhelm the man. "I'm saying I can help cover what you owe, not as a handout, but as a way to keep you on your feet." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the faint hum of the engine. The driver finally shook his head, laughing softly. "You're serious, aren't you?" Barron nodded. "I am." The man rubbed his face with one hand, his voice breaking as he said, "Why? Why would you do that for someone you don't even know?" "Because I've been in the back seat of a lot of cabs," Barron said honestly, and I've met a lot of drivers who remind me that behind every wheel is a person with a story. You've worked hard for years, and it's not right for it all to be taken away because of a bad stretch. The driver looked down at his hands, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. I don't know what to say, he admitted. No one's ever offered something like this before. You don't have to say anything right now, Barron replied. Just let me know how much you need to catch up on the payments. And if you want, I'll help. The man hesitated, clearly struggling with his emotions. I've always believed you should stand on your own 2 feet, he said quietly. But sometimes it feels like the world keeps knocking you down, no matter how hard you try. This isn't about standing on your own, Barron said gently. It's about getting the chance to keep going. The driver's eyes filled with tears, though he quickly blinked them away. I don't know how to thank you, Barron smiled. Start by letting me ride in this cab again someday. The driver let out a shaky laugh, his voice filled with a mix of relief and gratitude. You've got yourself a deal. As the rain picked up again, Barron leaned back in his seat, feeling a quiet sense of purpose settle over him. This wasn't just about helping one person. It was about reminding himself, and maybe even others, that the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference. A week passed after Barron's conversation with the taxi driver. True to his word, Barron had arranged to meet the man, whose name he now knew was Imran, at the same corner where they'd first met. The rain had given way to a bright, crisp day, and the streets buzzed with the usual city energy. When Imran pulled up in his cab, he stepped out to greet Barron. He looked hesitant, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. I wasn't sure if you'd actually show, he said with a nervous laugh. Barron smiled. I said I'd be here. Imran handed him a piece of paper, carefully folded. This is how much I owe to get the bank off my back, he said. But I still feel strange about this. It's not right to take money from someone like you. Barron unfolded the paper and glanced at the figure. It was more than he expected, but not impossible to manage. He looked up at Imran. This isn't about me or you. It's about making sure you keep what you've worked so hard for. Imran opened his mouth to protest, but Barron held up a hand. If it makes you feel better, think of it as a loan, he said. Pay me back someday, whenever you can. Imran nodded slowly, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. You don't know what this means to me, he said quietly. Barron smiled. I think I do. 2 weeks later, Barron was scrolling through his phone when a headline caught his eye. Local taxi driver's inspiring comeback story goes viral. Curious, he tapped the link. It was an article about Imran. It described how he had nearly lost his cab but managed to save it with the unexpected help of a mysterious young passenger. What caught Barron's attention most was a video embedded in the article. In the video, Imran was speaking to a reporter. He stood next to his cab, his voice steady but emotional. I was at the lowest point in my life, he said. I didn't know how I was going to make it. Then, out of nowhere, this young man shows up and changes everything. He didn't ask for anything in return. He just saw someone struggling and decided to help. The reporter asked, "What would you say to him if he were watching this?" Imran's face softened. "I'd tell him thank you," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "not just for helping me keep my cab, but for reminding me that there's still kindness in the world. He didn't just save my job. He gave me hope." Barron felt a lump form in his throat as he watched. He hadn't expected any recognition, let alone something like this. He had acted because it felt like the right thing to do, but seeing the impact on Imran's life made it all feel so much bigger. The video cut to Imran's cab. On the side, a small decal read, "Hope rides here," with gratitude to the stranger who made it possible. Barron stared at the screen, a mixture of surprise and humility washing over him. He hadn't set out to change someone's life that day, but he realized now just how powerful even the smallest acts of kindness could be. As he set his phone down, Barron felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't about going viral or being a hero. It was about being human, about showing up when it mattered most. A few days after the video went viral, Barron was walking through the city when he heard someone call out, "Hey kid, over here." He turned to see Imran stepping out of his cab, grinning from ear to ear. The usually weary lines on his face were softened, replaced by an unmistakable lightness. "I didn't think I'd run into you," Imran said, walking up to Barron, "but I'm glad I did." Barron smiled. "Good to see you again, Imran. How's everything going?" Imran nodded, his voice filled with emotion. "Better than I could have imagined. After that video, people started recognizing me. I've had passengers leave tips bigger than the fare, and some even told me they were inspired by what you did." Barron chuckled. "Sounds like you're the star now." Imran shook his head, his expression turning serious. "No, it's not about being a star. It's about having a second chance. Because of you, I'm not just keeping my cab. I'm keeping my dignity. And my family, they don't have to worry anymore." Barron noticed the way Imran's voice wavered, and it hit him just how deeply this had affected him. "I'm glad to hear that," Barron said sincerely. "But you did the hard work. I just gave you a little push." Imran smiled. "Maybe, but sometimes that little push is all someone needs." As they stood there, a couple walking by stopped, their faces lighting up. "Wait, you're the guy from the video," the woman exclaimed, pointing at Imran. Imran laughed, scratching the back of his head. "Yeah, that's me. And you must be the young man who helped him," the man added, looking at Barron with admiration. "We watched that story last night. It's amazing to see people still doing good things for each other." Barron felt a tinge of embarrassment but smiled. It's just what felt right. The couple nodded, their words carrying genuine warmth. "You've inspired so many people. Thank you for reminding us what kindness." As they walked away, Barron turned back to Imran. "Looks like your story's really making waves." Imran chuckled. "I guess so. But you know what I've learned from all this?" "What's that?" Barron asked. Imran's expression grew thoughtful. "That people are waiting for a reason to believe in something good. They just need to see it first. And because of you, they did." Barron didn't know how to respond. He'd acted out of instinct that day, but hearing those words made him realize the ripple effect his decision had created. It wasn't just about Imran anymore. It was about the people who had been moved by the story, the passengers who now tipped generously, the strangers who saw hope in a world that often felt indifferent. "I'm just glad I could help," Barron said quietly. Imran reached out and shook his hand firmly, his grip filled with gratitude. "You didn't just help me," he said. "You reminded me that there's still kindness in the world, and I promise you, I'll pay it forward." Barron nodded, his heart full. "That's all I could ask for." As Imran got back into his cab and drove off, Barron stood there for a moment, watching him disappear into the busy streets. The weight of what had happened settled over him, not heavy, but grounding. He realized that sometimes the smallest actions could create waves far greater than anyone could predict. As Barron watched the yellow cab disappear into the city, he couldn't help but reflect on how a simple decision had led to something so profound. He hadn't set out to make headlines or change lives that day. He had simply acted on what felt right in the moment. But now he could see the ripple effect, how one small act of kindness had grown into something much larger than himself. Imran's words echoed in Barron's mind. People are waiting for a reason to believe in something good. It struck a chord. The world can feel overwhelming at times, full of problems too big for any one person to solve. But what Barron realized was that the power to inspire change doesn't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with the quiet courage to help just one person. Life is full of moments where we're given a choice, to walk away or to step in, to ignore someone's struggles or to offer a hand. Those moments might seem small, insignificant even, but they carry the potential to create lasting impact. For Imran, it wasn't just about saving his cab. It was about restoring his hope and dignity. And for Barron, it was a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small it seems. The lesson was clear. Kindness isn't just about helping someone else. It's about creating a chain reaction, a ripple that touches lives in ways we might never fully understand. It's about showing up, even when it feels like the world is too big to change. As Barron turned and began walking home, a quiet sense of purpose filled him. The story wasn't just about Imran or even about himself. It was a reminder for everyone that no matter who we are, where we come from, or what we face, we all have the ability to make someone's world a little brighter. Because in the end, the smallest acts of kindness can truly change everything. Let's collaborate to enrich the world one kindness at a time. Let's create hope. Here we go. If this story inspired you, remember that even the smallest acts of kindness can change someone's life. Share this video to spread the message and remind others of the power of compassion. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment that could make your day brighter. Let's keep the kindness going, together.